everybody, it's Dr. Garrity here with a few of our students, alumni, faculty in the MASC program at the University of Denver. So today's our second chat, a doctoral chat, talking about kind of the next stage of doctoral education, prospecting programs, and a little bit of understanding different types of programs, as well as what doctoral life is really like. And this should help folks take your thought process on if a doc program is right fit for you, and asking some of those questions when you're evaluating different types of programs. All right, so thanks everybody for coming and joining us today. So we're going to bounce straight to Sebastian Harvey. Sebastian, let him introduce himself. He's a graduate of our MASC program, now in the PsyD program at the University of Denver. So Sebastian, go for it. Maybe tell us a little bit about, how'd you kind of get to where you are today, why that program, and what it's like being a PsyD student, and what PsyD even means compared to other types of doctoral degrees that we'll get into, such as PhDs or EDDs.
Yeah, so I'm Sebastian. I don't even remember when I graduated from the MASC program now, but started the PsyD program 2018, just about to finish up my second year. And I think what really drew me to it is the clinical experience. So PsyD is a doctor of psychology, really focused on clinical psychology, clinical work. And coming from coaching, I really liked working with people, working with athletes, and started noticing this gap in mental health with athletes, and had this experience working with a mom and her son, and noticing I had no idea what to do when he was struggling with his mental health. And that really drove me towards wanting to make a difference for athletes. So started 2018, decided on that route for the clinical experience. Was less interested in research, less interested in, or more interested in getting the hands-on experience really early. And that's what I found at DU, was you get thrown into clinical work pretty much right away. Started seeing my first patient maybe 2 months in to the program, had my first patient, and then started working at an inpatient facility for pretty severely traumatized children. So you get a lot of experience really quickly. I'd say the biggest downside is the financial aspect. PhDs offer much more money than PsyDs can, and that's partially because of the research and the expectation that you're teaching. But I've loved it so far. It's definitely busy. This right now is a super busy time. We have comprehensive clinical exams in our second year, and those are on Wednesday. And that's kind of what gets you on to the last part, which would be applying to an internship, getting out in the world, kind of your first real big job. So yeah.
I'm going to jump in and talk about one thing. When you say clinicals too, for some people that are like, what the heck does that mean? What is it? I mean, when you're talking about patients and doing clinicals, what do you really mean by that?
Yeah. So we're training to become clinical psychologists, working with patients or clients who in some regard want to work on their mental health. So we have a clinic on campus at DU in the graduate school professional psychology building, where we see our first patients, and we see people there throughout the year. And those are generally going to be less complicated cases. Maybe complicated is not the right word, but they don't throw anything too crazy at you for your first patient. Whereas in your field placement, kind of like a practicum, you're working with. So my first year, I was at an inpatient facility these were kids who, most of them had gone through some sort of extreme trauma, but most of them were dealing with either suicidality, homicidality. And so I worked on their crisis stabilization unit, trying to find them further care or really just stabilize them. Then my second year, I just finished up working at a middle school, a girls' athletic leadership school, a little bit of a different than traditional school. They really try to incorporate movement, and they're all about athletics and kind of finding the benefits of exercise and how that can be applied to learning. So I worked there more as kind of the school counselor role. And then this upcoming year, I will be at St. Anthony's Hospital in their emergency department. So there's all sorts of different opportunities out there where you apply for them. So it can be kind of competitive. That can be pretty stressful time of the year, is when everybody's applying to their different field placements. But everybody's generally pretty happy with them. There can be some issues, and that can be resolved either just yourself with the placement, or you can get help from the school. And everybody's so far been super helpful, just kind of trying to get you to try to get you through the path that you want. Something I did think was really cool is everybody kind of has their specialty focus. So everybody's primary focus is clinical psychology, but then you can pick a specialty. And there's some tracks that are already set up. There's like a substance abuse track, there's health psychology, you could do a specialty in forensics, but you can also create your own track. So I created my own, called it Athlete Mental Health. Just really tried to piece together classes that I thought would be more applicable to working with athletes or with teams. And then I have a second specialty, which is health psychology, just because I find that pretty fascinating and like working in the hospital environment as well. So there's a lot of kind of customization. One thing coming from the MASC program, since it's not clinical, whereas the other master's programs at DU would be clinical, we don't get as many classes waived. So I did get to waive research methods and qualitative research methods, which was awesome. So I didn't have to do those again, but those are the only two that I got to waive, whereas like sports psych masters get to waive a bunch more, and forensics masters get to waive even more than that. So that was one thing that I wish I knew a little bit more about going in. Just kind of had this idea of what classes I would have to take versus what I could waive, and then not really being able to do that. But it's been great. Loved the classes. Super tiring, super busy all the time. Yeah.
Let me touch on you. You brought up a lot of good points. And I want to hit a few things before I forget. So you hit the clinical work. One, the financial / tying into, right? One of the things about a doc program is, why do you want to get a doctoral degree, right? What's it going to help you do down the road? What happens too is, right, a lot of students finish their master's degree and then they're like, oh, now I'm out of a program and I'm done with school, or I'm done with education. No, hopefully you're not, right? And you're going to continue education, continue to learn and think. But sometimes people have that loss now, and they feel like they're going to lose their kind of community of scholars or lose the formal education. or just lose the quality, right? Hopefully if you have a good experience too, that you're like, man, I'm learning a lot. This is great stuff. It's really timely and accurate. It's not like hokey, somebody, just kind of whipped together something. This is actually some high quality content and engagement and materials and stuff like that. So it's a common thing. And we want to caution people, right? I always caution people to getting a doctoral degree without having a clear path. And Sebastian, you and I talked about this for a while too, about PhD versus PsyD and what do you really want to do? And you hit on one of those key points, Jordan, and this relates to the EDD, right? The EDD, a doctorate of education, right, is more along the same lines as a doctorate of psychology. They're less research intensive degrees. It doesn't mean you can't do research. You don't have, right? It doesn't mean that, but it means that you're generally going to do more clinical work or it's less research intensive. When you really look at the courses and the curriculum, as well as the faculty supervisors, you generally have less research and grants and that kind of thing than PhD programs. And that's fine. It's just a different sort of program, right? And you want to think about the financial aspect, or what is it going to set you up to do down the road? Is it going to let you teach? Is it going to let you do research? Is it, what are your potential employments at anywhere in the sector? Is it university? Is it private practice, right? Because some clinical doctors, this is the PsyDs, some of them now too, Sebastian, right? They get paid very well, $150, $250 an hour, sometimes more depending on what they're doing, for evaluations and therapy or consulting, court, forensic, testifying and expertise testimony and that kind of stuff. So some of them make pretty good money too. And it might take some years to get established in your practice or working in a clinical setting in a hospital or outpatient or something like that. A sport team could be another one. But those are certainly options, and you just want to think about those things before you're like, oh, let me invest 3 to 5 years and the new expense of another degree without a clear path towards, a job. All right. And I'm going to go kick my dog here in a second. I'm kidding. I'm not going to kick the dog. Okay. Anything else there, guys, too, on, anybody want to jump in or have a question or reaction to Sebastian there, or Sebastian, anything else?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the financial piece. There's not too much in way of scholarship, but we do have, there's a lot of opportunities to kind of get paid while you're working. So a lot of people will work at the clinic, at like the front desk. There's a lot of like graduate assistant positions. And then if you're lucky, you can get one of the field placements or practicum sites, you can get paid to do your work. And that's really awesome. So there are kind of opportunities to get paid to do things. It's definitely not as much as probably a PhD, but there are some of those opportunities. And then in terms of research, I think most people that I know are involved in some sort of project. It might not be like specifically research, but there's a military project where they're rowing across the Atlantic, something like that. But there's students who are involved in the like planning and training of these people who are going to row. That's an intensive project. And then there's things going on with the military. There's somebody's doing research with music. So it's kind of, everybody can do it. You just have to find it and kind of make it happen, less than like a requirement of the program.
I just want to comment too. I mean, because and this sounds bad. Like we have a range of ages in this group here that we're talking about, and it's pretty common for doc program stuff and beyond graduate school. We say this to students or athletes all the time too, but right, like what you just said too is you got to differentiate yourself, or you got to develop your skills, your resume. You have to seek out opportunities. It's not, even if you just get a doctoral degree, it's not a magical thing. Nobody like, oh wow, like poof, like, oh, like everything's just going to rain in on you. I mean, that's not how life works either. You're doing those things in order to learn, grow, challenge yourself, and figure out too some things that you like and you don't like. And you want to be careful again when you sign up for a commitment like that. Like if you like, oops, I don't kind of like this, and you're doing a doc program and you're doing research or you're specializing in an area and you don't like doing concussion testing, all right, or you don't like, you talk about clinicals, the idea, I've thought about the idea of like myself, if ever getting a doctoral degree in psychology to do, therapy with somebody with like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or like, wow, like, let me think about that. Let me really stop and think, do I see myself doing that?
Yeah. I think that's a good point. There have been, I think every year some people drop out of our program, whatever reason it is. But I think our first semester, there was a girl who quickly realized that's not what she wanted to do. She didn't have a master's yet either. So she transferred to a different program, decided to just do a master's, and I think she's pretty happy with that as well. So like I love working with like bipolar, for example, just because you said that, like one of the patients I work with, pretty severe trauma, and she also has bipolar disorder. And I think it's fascinating, and I love working with that kind of person.
Which is great, right? To each their own. Yeah, JD.
So, you both hit up on a bunch of points that, that are kind of important just to me as a student and a coach, but two main ones. One, just talking about, since we all have been in the MASC program, just what is that transition like, right? Like, what does the MASC program, how does that prepare you for a doctoral program? That's my first question. And the second one is, as I'm, finally, hopefully coming to the end of my process, my journey here. I know nothing, G, I'm sorry. But, I'm like, for me personally, I can't wait to get into the field, right? I can't wait to focus on coaching and putting all these things that I've been learning about for so long into the context of coaching without the school, right? Doing like that, right? So when we're going into these doctoral programs, how do you, I remember you're you used to coach swimming, right? Like, is that now something that you'll do, for the passion, and whatever you're doing in your doctoral program is going to be your primary profession? Like, how do we continue to link sport with these programs of higher education? Because I don't want to get my master's and not be coaching. Like, after I work so hard to understand what I'm doing here, I don't want to get the doctoral program and then the doctorate program. Thank you. And then, and so just, I know you said you got to create your own lane, but what is that like? Like, how do you link it to sport, and how did the MASC program kind of get you ready for that?
Assuming you want to or need to link it to. And we'll come back to that one in a second. That's a big topic. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it really does depend what you want to do with it. Because if you want to coach and like that's what you want to do, like I don't think what I'm doing now would really help me just want to coach. In fact, like I haven't coached since I started because I don't have time and energy. And but I also think like if you wanted to step into more of like Dr. G, Dr. K's roles of teaching this, like a PhD might be something, or the EED, is that what it was called? Yeah, that might be a different route. And for me, like I really wanted to focus on mental health within the athletic community. And so partially that's kind of creating a space where I can do that, but that also meant I needed to learn about how to work with all sorts of patients anyways. And then being able to apply what we learned about coaching. I think like one of the big things I see is how we develop people as coaches, and a lot of that you can learn about more in a doctoral program, where like you learn about human development, or how people come to develop like suicidal ideation. And then you can tie that into how we coach children or coach people, and why are athletes driven to performance enhancing drugs, or to drug abuse or misuse, or why is there so much violence in different sports? And so that can all be tied back to just who are they as a person? What is our sports community like perpetuating, that's creating these problems? And recently, I think Dr. G, Dr. K, and I have been just thinking about how our program talked a lot about Foucault, and for me now, that's a lot of that's coming back to that, and I'm tying a lot of Foucault into how I think about different disorders and different just problems in communities.
Okay.
Interesting. I'll jump in here too, if you guys don't mind. Sebastian, when you were talking about the clinical work and such, I was just trying to think about, like, because we were all in the coaching realm, so what that looks like in coaching realms, or like a coaching research PhD, and how that all works, and maybe my just experience of like where I saw I was going with my PhD program might help. I was really I wasn't so interested in the psychology side going clinical work. I was a practicing coach, and I was like, man, I had some questions I had in my head. I was a full-time assistant coach, so I was okay there, but I still had these other questions that I was thinking about. And so my direction was, because we have to kind of combat, well, what does a PhD or a doctoral program provide me in this coaching space? And, what are opportunities there in the clinical, or in the psychology realm? There's a whole body of that's a huge, well-developed profession where you have you're working with many needs of individuals in the public sector, the sports sector, from a psychology piece. But where does that kind of fit into coaching? Because we don't necessarily need a doctoral degree to coach, and how that all works. So my interest was, I saw my vision kind of being like, oh, I wanted to be an athletic director to help develop other coaches. I thought I was also going to be like a Division III kind of coach, where I had like multiple roles. I could see myself, because I still had these questions. I wanted to coach, and then maybe take a leadership role where I could teach help other coaches develop. So that was kind of my thing. But so when I went in, that's what I was thinking about doing, is kind of having this three-way pillar. I teach a couple classes, an athletic director, help develop and organize an athletic program, and then still be an active coach in that athletic program. And when I got into my studies, I started, continuing research, and really just got into that. And then when I was all finished, it was like, okay, well, now what do we do? I was prepared for really all three of those things. And I just wound up going into the professorship, coach education, coach development, teaching and helping coaches with, kind of that pillar there. But my point is that in the coaching kind of space, what are opportunities that we can tap into with a doctoral program? And we can collaborate on ideas, and you guys can jump in. But those would be like coach development, as a professorship. Some of the sports science stuff, exercise science, like the sports scientists. I might also argue that like sociology researchers, are becoming a little bit more prominent, and organizations and national governing bodies of sport. But, think about where a lot of those more popular fields are. I would say lean a little bit more towards the, science realms, sports science realms. That's a way to tap into that space. I would also say coach developer and like organizational leaders at national governing bodies, but those are also, limited in capacity, but certainly possible. So anyway, those are some of my thoughts, opportunities of where, in the field of sport coaching, PhD work might, or doctoral work might go.
Gonna slip in, if you guys ever do an internet search for non-academic, non-professor careers or jobs with your doctoral degree is a fairly kind of common thing. And I heard Dr. K kind of bring that up a little bit there of what can you do with your doctoral degree that is a non-traditional or non-professor world option. And there are some. In coaching, it's a little bit thin compared to, let's say, engineering or something like that, where you might, or biology, we're going to be employed by a pharmaceutical company or, a military defense contractor or something like that. Okay. Let's get to, we're going to transition to it. I want to get Jordan into the conversation about the EDD things that he's looking at. I'm going to touch on 3 things, rapid fire. Sebastian also mentioned specialties within the program. Okay, so each program will probably have its general track as well as specialties. Sometimes they're called cognates or concentrations. You might have the degree kind of major, but then underneath it will be like a cognate or a concentration, or you could do a minor. So at Tennessee, I did the coursework for a minor in statistics. I did a cognate in cultural studies of education, and my concentration, my degree was actually higher education. Okay, pretty common. Transferring, number 2, transferring courses and waiving courses will be program specific. A lot of programs don't let you transfer in many courses, if any at all. If they do, it's maybe 10 to 15 credits. Maybe it's like 3 to 4 classes, maybe a little bit more, usually no more than like 10, 15% of the total degree hours. Okay. And if you do have a master's degree, that, whether you know it or not, the master's degree often will kind of count towards, or at least knock out some credits towards a doctoral degree. And then the third thing, I'll put this on the table for later, but I just want to mention it as we're touching on, is that transitioning who you are piece. And again, Dr. Clay just did it. JD kind of talked about it, and you inferred like, oh, how do you get your degree and still coach, right? And just like career transitions for athletes, there's career transitions for coaches or ex-coaches then, or maybe hybrid coach. I still coach, but I still do these other things. So there's a lot of possibilities, but I just want to bring that to the table before I forget. And we'll see where it goes after that. Okay. Jordan, tell us about what you're thinking about, where you're at a little bit, and some of the we've talked about some of these things. So rock and roll.
Yeah. So I'll be hopefully finishing the MASC program beginning of fall or winter next year, and then I'll be starting my first year teaching at a high school for PE coming up this year in the fall if we end up going to school. And then also what I'm doing now is strength and conditioning for the school. So what I'm looking at is benefits from EDD or PhD, because I'm unsure. I'm kind of all over the place right now, but I definitely want to get some experience where I'm going to be at right now as a teacher. But then later on, I'm thinking, maybe I want to take one of those, AD roles or head of the PE department, or PE for the state of Colorado, or something like that. And would an EDD limit me in that capacity, or would a PhD help more? Or so those are the kind of things I'm thinking about. Also, just time, like hybrid courses or online courses, and how maybe that'll like fit with my teaching schedule, and so those are kind of things I'm thinking about.
Gives my response. In regards to PE or K-12, right? We talk about this in K-12 setting. I don't really think it matters a whole lot if you have an EDD or a PhD to be the lead of a department. It's a nice thing, and it's probably a bonus, but again, it's kind of not a requirement. It could be positioned as I think getting yourself some knowledge and skills above and beyond, or more preparation for that kind of role, which could be great. If you want to look at it, it's pretty common too. I think a lot of teacher coaches look towards administrative roles. You know, that could be the AD roles or assistant principal, et cetera, eventually. I can think of old coaches I have now, they're back from high school, that are in those roles now, you know, 20 years, 25 years later. And those things are kind of net and required then. Not necessarily for a principal, but it still is a advantage. I don't know if you guys, some of you guys probably know, my mom was a teacher and then principal and then superintendent of the school district. And she earned her PhD while she was being a principal, went back to school for it, and back in Ohio. And so she became assistant superintendent, eventually interviewed and became the superintendent for Cleveland Heights, University Heights School District up in Cleveland. And those type of jobs are basically required. Now she did a PhD versus an EDD. I don't really know why. I couldn't tell you. You know, she passed away years ago. But I think it was probably what was available at Ohio University and what was maybe common at the time. She never published research or did that. She was more of a practitioner degree for her, and that's fine. You know, I'll stop.
Also in the K-12.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to add, and also the K-12 setting, a little bit different than coaching, is that with that other degree, just like a master's, it is probably also a pay jump in that regard, where you know, I don't know, I think there's probably a handful of coaches in the collegiate setting that have their PhD, or, you know, probably a handful, but, you know, I don't know what that pay jump is, but I do know in the K-12 setting that's a little bit more common, where, you know, people would look to actually do that because it is a nice pay jump advantage that way, but not probably so much in the coaching realm.
Yeah. I have heard now too, you want to be careful with that, because if you get into the K-12 setting and there's an automatic salary pay jump, if you don't have years of experience for that full-time job going in, it sometimes makes you a less attractive candidate because they have to start you off at a higher salary. So, you know, like if I suddenly became a high school teacher, I would have to start at like the highest salary scale because I have, you know, a PhD plus. So I would want to know, depending on the school district schedule, is that they, and especially if there's a union, it's generally not an option. They have to kind of do those types of things. So depending on what the laws are for it. I will say for an AD, depending on where you would want to be an AD, if it's, you know, high school, probably, you know, PhD, EDD, MBA are all probably good options. I don't know that there's a clear favorite. When you start getting into more collegiate levels, I'm going to say at the more academic institutions, the PhD or EDD would probably be looked at as favorable compared to more of the for-profit colleges. They exist, right? That they're going to be more MBA focused and fundraising, contracts, and that if you have those skills compared to a research degree. And I was told that years ago, and I believe that wholeheartedly still, that, you know, if I was still back coaching in the SEC or something like that, like, and wanted to get out, the MBA would have done much more than me to become an athletic director than a PhD. If I wanted to stay in sports science or as an AD in sports performance roles and overseeing, you know, sports medicine, athletic training, nutrition, strength conditioning, psychologists, and working on a support staff, the PhD to do research is an attractive option for people. But when you get into the more financial aspects of it, you know, the dollars and cents is going to take over.
What about as a college professor? Is there an advantage to a PhD in a particular field, I would guess, compared to an ME?
Yeah. And this is, Jordan, we touched on this a little bit when we chatted before, that there are, right, different fields, right? If you think about universities, and you can look at maybe the Chronicle of Higher Education, Inside Higher Ed, and some websites where they're going to talk about these things, and look at how many jobs people study this stuff. You have a hard time finding it because it's not too robust. But if you just stop and think, how many jobs do you think are out there in a business college every year? I mean, a lot, right? If you think about, you know, medical schools, schools of engineering or science, biology, these are massive programs. Psychology is a massive degree program. You can go on, I think it's ICES. It's like, is that right? Yeah, it's a federal government website about educational statistics, and look at how many degrees are awarded by major annually. And that'll give you a little snapshot of, wow, there's a lot of jobs in these kind of areas. Okay. So within the world of sport, you might look at kinesiology as kind of the overarching term, and then start to look at, well, how many jobs really are there in biomechanics, physiology, nutrition, your typical physical sciences, compared to sports psych, sport management, and then way down the list too is like, right, sport sociology, history, philosophy, pedagogy or phys ed would be probably just a little bit above those things. So absolutely, Sean, it does matter, because when you come out, I'll use committees I've been on. If you have a degree, let's say in sport management, and we're looking to hire somebody in sport coaching in our specific program, we're going to look to see, is this person, really locked in on sport management, athletic directors, like maybe they study consumer behavior in sport management. Like, I don't really care. Like, that's great. That's really great, but it's not sport coaching, and the application, their knowledge, their understanding of coaching and helping coaches in these roles. I don't really care about consumer behavior. I don't care about sport marketing. I'm going to look for somebody more like Dr. K that's got, phys ed, undergrad, exercise science masters, pedagogy, coaching ed, PhD, that can teach a variety of these courses, that does research specific in coaching education, coach development. But there's many more jobs in sport management. There's many more jobs in sports psychology. So the opportunities are growing in coaching, but I want to be realistic too, that it is not a explosive field. And there's still many universities that hire people with sports psych degrees in coaching roles, or they're hiring faculty that are not practitioners, that are really hardcore researchers, or the potential to get grant funding. So that's the politics of higher ed right now, is that when dollars and cents pay the bills and research looks great, a lot of places want people that can do that, regardless if they have any other practical skills in coaching or career advice for sport workers. If it's all about grants and publications, you need to kind of feel that out with the place that you're looking for. Okay.
I think on the flip side,
I'll add here. Sorry. I'll just say here, sorry, Sebastian. Yeah. But I was, Dr. G, you talked about like these different pillars of kinesiology, fields of study. I'll take another twist, is also like the difference between EDD and PhD in that regard, because within professorship positions, you have different roles. Like my role, I'm technically a clinical assistant professor. And so technically, if you look at my job description, it doesn't really have a whole lot to do with doing research. I do that on my own. It's an added thing, but it's not, I don't get evaluated on it. You think about like 3 pillars of professorship. You get evaluated on teaching, research, and service. And the role that you go into might be more heavily focused on teaching, which is what mine is, or Dr. G's, which is a tenure track position, which is he also needs to show that he does research. Now, again, it's just depending on what the job description is, but technically in the position that I'm currently in, I could probably be put into this position with an EDD. Like I don't necessarily, I do it on, I do the research on my own, but in a tenure track position where like, yes, I'm getting evaluated hardcore on research and bringing in those funding dollars that Dr. G is, that's a key component of my job, the job description, then a PhD is going to be more heavily looked upon. So.
Sebastian, you want to jump in there? Yeah.
Yeah. I was just thinking on the flip side, we have a lot of adjunct professors or professors in our program who have PsyDs or they have PhDs, but they primarily will work at wherever they're working, their private practice or different clinics throughout the day, and then teach in the afternoon, or they'll teach 1 or 2 classes. So there's definitely a split there where there's some who are their faculty, they're full-time teaching, and then there's some who are teaching, practicing, maybe doing research as well, and it's kind of a mix.
It's great. I want to tie this into a couple things, just so everybody's aware, and we got people listening. One of the things to look up would be faculty workload or faculty responsibilities. You could also look up faculty senate policies, and somewhere the university is going to have a description of what Dr. K said about faculty lines. So you have rank and lines. You have typically have in the U.S., and this is not the same everywhere. They have different names for the same kind of structure. It's a hierarchy: instructor, assistant professor, associate professor, professor, or full professor. And then you have different titles with it, like tenure track line, clinical line. You also have special research lines, or you could have a professor of the practice line, right? So you can see this too in medicine. I know JD's wife's a physician. You could have somebody with an MD that is a professor of the practice. Maybe they teach like a specialty class, or their job is they're employed by the university. They work in the hospital, but they're maybe teaching faculty. And they have clinical skills. They can put in lines and tubes. Maybe they also see patients and they help the students, but maybe not. They're doing traditional research or grants. So you'll want to look at those kind of rules or policies that the universities have, okay? Faculty lines, senate, faculty workload, responsibility, something called like that. There's documents out there. The next thing is that what Dr. K brought up, when you're evaluating or prospecting a program, okay, think about who are these faculty? Just like your coaches, right? Just like we would tell an athlete looking at college or a professional athlete looking for a pro contract. Who's the coach? What's the staff look like? How long have they been there? Do they plan on continue being there? What's the turnover? A lot of people don't think about those things at university level, and they're extremely important, okay? If you have a university that is run by part-time or adjunct faculty, they may or may not be as committed as full-time faculty. There's different pressures on different people. A lot of the online programs are staffed by part-time or adjunct faculty, right? And this is more common, I think, in online programs or in really, really high-pressure, lowly funded programs, that they're trying to save budget on the personnel involved. And so they pay the faculty less. Okay, so the average rate for an adjunct faculty per credit hour might be between $1,000 and, if they're lucky, $1,500 in the US per credit hour. So if somebody's teaching a class, a 3-4 credit class on a quarter semester system, they might be making $3,500 to $5,000 to teach that class. Okay, so just imagine a program where every faculty is like that, and then maybe to supervise a doctoral student, maybe they get a little bit of a small stipend as well, a few $100 or $1,000 if they chair a dissertation committee or a project, right? Why would somebody? What's the incentive? What's the motivation? Is that faculty really committed to doctoral education, and are they really committed to mentorship and your development? And teaching you things that are outside of the curriculum, and spend some time in the lab or doing your research or surveys or ethnographies, interviews, that is the more traditional PhD model is super important. I do think it's less important for EDD or PsyD because you're not doing the dissertation. Now I will say, in like Sebastian's case with the PsyD, you need to have faculty though that are committed to mentoring you, helping you through your clinical hours, thinking through these, really challenging clients, and then developing and getting out and graduating and passing boards in obtaining your own position or finding jobs. There's a lot of things involved with that. And so you've really got to have people involved in that. And if the faculty has great turnover, or they're part-time or just not committed to it because of other pressures, those things go into play. Okay. How, guys, what else? Questions, reactions?
I want to say I have to jump off just right at 2. So if there's any PsyD specific questions, now would be a great time.
I actually, real quick, since before you go, last one. Now I say this too because I know. How many of you guys have parents or close family members with doctoral degrees or with a doctoral degree or another graduate degree? Okay, so that was 1, 2, 3 out of 7, or yeah, 7 of us. That's not uncommon either to see that. So just bring it up as a way of thinking about, right, how we reproduce, these social norms and things like that, and how things sometimes don't seem so foreign to us, whereas for other people they might seem foreign. But I'm knowing that I'm talking to you guys as well as other folks that are going to be watching this, considering, is this for me? Am I a doctoral person? It helps when you have models in your family kind of like that, but yeah, it's for everybody. If it makes sense, it makes sense. So you can see yourself doing that.
I think on the last talk, you kind of talked about just being in the flow of like going and doing courses and being in school all the time, and how that might be like a deciding factor. And I feel like, I don't know, maybe I identify with that a little bit. Like I feel like I need to be in a program, continuing to push myself to the next, the next level, because that's, I guess what's expected by our society to some point. And yeah, so that was a big kind of thing for me. I was like, wow, do I actually want to do it, or is that just what I'm being told and what I feel like I need to do? So.
Yeah, and I certainly felt that way. I mean, I haven't really even had a single break since like I started school in like kindergarten. Like just keep going through, and like at this point, I feel like I really know how to do school really well. And like at some point that has to end, but I also know like this is what I wanted to do. And but yeah, there's a certain like comfort in being in school.
Along those same lines, like I'm curious, if I was 25, I'm 35 years old. If I was 25, I would jump right into this. I've seen some good opportunities overseas that Dr. G has sent me, but I'm not, right? And so my wife and I are starting a family. We're like, I'm trying to balance my kind of personal ambition, career ambition with this family life. Like, you guys talk about that? Like, is it even realistic? Is it smart? Is it insane to take on raising a kid with starting a PhD program? Like, I know it's a real talk.
There's a couple people in my program who have kids. Couple people who've been married for a long time. I mean, we were just talking before this, but I got married on Saturday, and like there's definitely, it's busy. It's like a commitment, but you're like, you find the time, like you find that time to be with your family or to do kind of what you really enjoy doing. And I even considered like finding a little bit of time to still coach, and had the opportunity and decided not to because I needed time to just not be doing stuff. So like, I think it's totally possible. It's busy and it's stressful. But everybody kind of manages it their own way. And there's a wide range of ages and family situations. And I think somebody in my cohort just had a kid, so it's totally possible.
I was gonna say, just like for me personally, young kids, it depends what your wife does. You know what I mean? Like My wife's a boss. So, and we got young kids. So when your wife is a boss and you got young kids, as you're working on your bossdom, right? You're not at boss status. So it's on a lot, it's on you, and that's for me personally in the master's program, that's been the toughest challenge, right? How do you daddy daycare it all and then, still do your work, and for me, I'd say I was mediocrely successful. Most of my work got done at the hours where everybody wants to be in bed, and so that's a struggle. And so like thinking about higher education, it's tough because I couldn't do a higher level right now in my life. I got 3 kids under the age of 8, like it's my youngest at 14 months. It's not happening. Like I can't take away from them anymore. Right. But when they get older, it's something that I'm very interested in. And it's because, right, like it's because of this program. It's because of the MASC program, right? I now have finding coaching helped me find something that I could get under, right? Like I can get behind in something like a passion, right? Learning was reinvigorated through this process, through this MASC program, like I enjoy learning about the art of coaching. I enjoy learning about people. I enjoy learning how to learn again, right? And so while, Sebastian's like all the way through, I think since my path wasn't all the way through school, I might have forgotten a little bit of that, right? You fall out of love with that learning process, and so like MASC reinvigorated that love, right? And given me a little bit more direction in where to put those energies. And so this is very appealing to me, and it's something that I want to pursue, but I have to also know when, right? Like that's a huge thing. When to do it. When to do it. It's hard.
I'm kind of in the same boat, so I appreciate that.
And
And then also, like, not to get too far into my lane, but pursuing like a really niche field. I'm kind of curious, Dr. G, Dr. K, your thoughts on, again, balancing I'm really interested in disability sport, para sport, adaptive sport, whatever you want to call it. Balancing that interest and curiosity with potential employment, if you're going to invest this much time. Curious to get your thoughts on how big of a pool that is.
Sean, I think it is a niche, but there are professorship positions. When I was at WVU and their coaching education program, we had a professor that specialized in that solely research and from the coaching side of coaching disabilities. It would also be prominent in the PE field as well. Is in regards to sports too. So I think you might actually be surprised. There are quite a few in that, in my experiences, that, again, not as huge as the big broad scope of coaching in general, but there is a pillar there. And, that does research and teaching of those specific courses, disabilities for athletes and in the PE realm. So I could see, he was hired, the person that I'm referring to was hired and taught in both the coaching and PE sector. So I could see, like, getting in there, you could also be lumped into physical education teacher preparation field there with that. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I gotta hop off, but it was good to see everybody. And if you have questions, certainly email me, and Dr. G has my email. I won't put my email out for every single person who watches this to see, but let me know if you have questions, PsyD, PhD, the whole journey. Cool.
Great. Thanks for coming, Sebastian. As you leave, I'll give you credit too. I'll give you credit for not coaching while you're doing this ID program, because I encouraged you not to do it too, knowing that it's just, everybody wants to take on one more thing, and it's just hard, man. It's hard to do it all, and it's hard to do it all well. and then you're just going to be stressed out and you're going to spread everything too thin. And that relates to that other issue too about, right, kind of transitioning in life. There's a lot of folks that, are in that 20-ish year old age range, Sean, that, they're still going through school, maybe as a primary plan or a backup plan, or they think it's cool, or, they're socialized to think that they have to do it. And they don't stop and live a little or get some more worldly experience. And sometimes I think it hurts them. I think it hurts them in how they approach their role, whether that be as a professor or a practitioner, and then that transition of their own identity. And right, I haven't coached now in a couple of years at all, and that's okay. I'm okay with that. But there's a lot of PhDs that were coaches. It's not like being a biologist PhD and you're like, yeah, I'm a biologist. It's like you have to kind of do that. Like we're so tied right to our coaching roles that getting out of that is really hard for folks. And again, there are some folks that do it, that juggle it, and there's a lot that don't. I'll add with Dr. K on the opportunities. The more classes you can teach, or the more grants you can get, or if you can meet any accreditation, if you're going to maybe look at an accredited program, and if you can kind of fill a role there too, all of those things help. They really help you kind of get a job, and you want to think about, like in my case, my first job, in part I got it was because I was a CSCS, strength coach for years, and had those certifications. I wasn't doing exercise science, physiology, that typical strength and conditioning research. And that was okay because I was doing more coaching research, but I could teach the strength and conditioning class, which is one of the leg ups that I got. I could teach a lot of different classes. Dr. K is the same way. He can teach a lot of different classes. So when universities are looking for people that can teach these classes, as opposed to a particular tiny little specialist, and some universities have those specialists, they're looking for a health epidemiologist. All right. Well, and again, going back to, you can look to see how many of those jobs are really available, and then how to position yourself. And then you write a cover letter and you tailor your resume and your career experience to help you get those jobs. And people make career transitions within higher ed too.
So along those lines, like it seems like a big part of a PhD is the dissertation project, which is obviously a very specific niche, right?
Beautiful.
So that's another question. Like how far developed should that dissertation project be in our brains before we even think about applying to a program?
Beautiful question. So the one thing I'll be quiet, Dr. K jump in there. But the one thing I'll say right now is the dissertation, the doctoral dissertation. I'm not talking about EDD or PsyD, where it may be a project or a little bit of a lesser requirement. And I apologize because there are great scholars that have EDDs and PsyDs and that do great dissertations or work. But on average, the requirements, as far as I've seen, are not as rigorous as a PhD dissertation. Okay. That's fine. PhD dissertation in the literature too is basically the number one barrier to graduation, right? It's easy to go through classes, guys. Okay, right? When Sebastian was talking about being a good student, it's easy to be a good student compared to doing and writing your own original research dissertation. Okay, I was talking to a prospective student today that actually looking at our master's program. And I say, basically, the undergraduate degree is a giveaway. Master's degree, and ours in particular, is pretty challenging. You go to the next level for doctoral degree, you're going to earn every bit of that, and especially that dissertation. Okay, and I'll be quiet. Okay, I'll come back later.
I'll just add that that's like the sport analogy. Every time you go up a level in competition, the speed of the game gets up. Well, within like the PhD program, like once you get past your coursework, I can still remember the day that I finished my 37 hours of coursework and I had 15 credits left to graduate, which were considered dissertation hours. 15 credits. I'm done. Graduate with a PhD. And I can remember my advisor, who I fondly know. And many of the other professors said, "Oh, you're halfway there." You know, what are you talking about? I have 15 credits left. No, now you're just about halfway there. Good luck. And I'll just share one other story about as I entered the dissertation process. Again, that's not the coursework. Now you're doing some of the stuff. My advisor, who's also on this call here today, gave me one of his papers that he wrote right after he completed his dissertation process. And I know we're not supposed to cuss on this, this little video, but the title of the paper was From Bitch to Mentor. And the autoethnography is this story that he wrote with his dissertation advisor, discussing the experience that he went through with it. And he was sharing it with me because he was preparing me for what was about to happen over the next couple weeks. But what I can say to end the story is that it is probably the most rewarding experience that you will ever have of your entire life once you complete it. But the key point is getting a good mentor that is in the same line as your research interests and really is going to push, challenge, and prepare you for what you want to be able to do. And that's doing, in a PhD program, that's being prepared to do research, and good research, not junk. And that's, and that's how you kind of make your bread and butter from that, in that realm. So just some of my concluding thoughts on that topic there. So
just to fill in others too, reading between the lines, I was his dissertation advisor, obviously, guess. A lot of people don't know that in our program either. But I don't talk about him much because, quite frankly, he's his own person. And my dissertation advisor, was unbelievably tough and challenging on me. And obviously, I've carried that down to everybody that I come in contact with. But the one thing I'll say, and I'll expand upon that because anybody can read my paper and stuff like that. But the relationship too with your close faculty, especially in traditional PhD programs, residential PhD programs. Okay, and now we're moving these things online. It's going to happen. They're going to get better. There were at the beginning a lot of online doctoral degrees that were quite frankly terrible. For-profit universities, I don't need to name them, but the University of blah, blah, blah in the southwest of the US, and the University of, nobody knows any of these people because they're not true scholars, and they accept anybody in the program. There are problems. There's problems, okay? It's basically like a scam university, some of them. So we're going to see it get better in the years to come. But the traditional model of where you're in the lab or you're working with your faculty supervisor and you're starting to do some research and get your classes going and you're starting to get some publications, do some presentations, right? You're working your way up the so-called ladder was really important, right? And it was really important to be around those people and have that environment because they are so crucial to your growth and development. As well as making sure too, like there's a dark side that they don't abuse you. There's a lot of harassment apparently if you read the research and you talk to folks, there's a lot of harassment that goes on in doctoral programs too. So you want to really make sure that the people around you and your supervisors are on the up and up and doing good things the right way. And sometimes you don't have a mental model of it and you're like, oh, I guess this is normal. I should be doing this work for you, or I'm supposed to be grateful that you're, maybe treating me poorly, or there's no funding, or you're not talking to me, or you don't reply to emails even. So those types of things, happen, and people do come and go with different programs because it's not a right fit, and because there's maybe not the best quality of faculty there too. So, that's a big thing, Sean, with you can take some coursework, I think, on your own, or do the coursework kind of over a couple of years, but finishing that dissertation and having those research skills is really, the bread and butter next level of becoming a professor, specifically a research professor, right? And we haven't even touched on about teaching, but I say that because teaching still tends to be less valued and assumed that we can kind of just, pick it up as we go, which is we won't go down that road for today. That can be for another day. How about some final thoughts or last questions on this one? We'll keep it to about an hour or so.
are there places you would recommend to look for funded positions or places with good reputations that you'd recommend for instance, like a sociology program? Any places to start?
Well, none of them have given me any kickbacks yet, so I'm not naming anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, you want me to give you this is going to be
Yeah,
watched.
I got Google, but you know,
This is going to be 100,
nuggets.
112 people are going to watch this video on YouTube, and there ought to be some royalties coming to me. So the first thing I'll say is hopefully we can develop one at DU, but I won't hold my breath on it anytime soon. There are a few. I would go again with mostly, you know, if you're going to go like traditional doctoral program, you know, bigger research one or R1 high classification universities where there's research active faculty is generally, if you really want to become a researcher, you need to learn from researchers and people that are engaged in it. You can also look at on the various websites, and you can send out your resume certainly too, and look for GA positions or graduate assistant positions. I wish that they had more that were online. I don't really see that very much. They're usually still in person because they want people to teach or do research in the lab in person. But you can still find some graduate assistant positions. If you can't find them within the academic department, then you might also look for the athletic department or recreation department. You know, that's actually how I had part of my master's degree paid for at Tennessee was teaching racquetball and weightlifting. And then I got put on with athletics. So actually, you laughed it up, JD. Our Emil Catnandy at Tennessee, all my guys at Tennessee, Emil Catnandy was a world champion racquetball player. He used to demolish all of us. It was unbelievable. Anyway, so you can look for funding like that. Obviously, if you go into sociology or like a main discipline too, you'll have more funding opportunities than you will in, you know, sport psychology or coaching or sport management. Yeah.
I would say like to reach out. Also, if you could find maybe some of the key researchers in your field, like so adaptive sports, looking at the names of those research papers and then reaching out to them directly. And then they'll kind of tell you, about the funding that they have, because a lot of those, especially the GA positions, it's not like it's coming through the higher ed jobs website. Now, sometimes you see them come out. You know, you'll see them GA position for, you know, they may be just general teaching positions to teach, you know, some of the phys ed classes or something, which is fine. Those are funding. That's kind of the way I went, was getting funding that way. And then, you know, doing the other research stuff. So I wasn't in on a research role. I went in on a teaching role. But even still, some of those teaching GA roles are still, you have to look on the exact school's website to even find it. And then even if it is there, like I didn't even find it on the Southern Miss website. I found out from it because I reached out to Dr. G because he had a very similar interest to me and say, hey, I was kind of looking for some funding to help out here. Hey, look, here are the GA roles that we have coming up and this is how you go apply. But it's not like it's applied for, you know, it's you know, coming through on these job feeds. So that's why I see that if you can see the names like, this name keeps coming up on disability sports, go email them and say, hey, you know, I had some similar interests, and I think you can get a little bit more leeway by asking those questions directly. So that's my thought on that.
Yeah. I'm gonna add one more thing with that, Sean, and see if you have a follow up or anything. But it does. I do caution people to don't get a PhD or doctoral degree, especially a research degree, if you're really kind of not somewhat along a line of research. Okay. Like in my case, I knew I didn't want to be a physiologist or biomechanist or nutrition researcher. Like I like that research and I enjoy reading it, some of it. But it never really fit. Like, this is what I want to do. And then when I actually started getting through into my doctoral program and started coming across more psychology of coaching, cultural studies, sociology of coaching, then I was like, wow, like this is what I want to do. And it wasn't until I was into some of the courses doing that kind of stuff. There are other people, however, that are like, right, they go to college or they have an idea that they want to be a sociologist, an engineer, a biomechanist, whatever it might be, you know, and they just go straight through, which is terrific because they've just got such clarity on doing that, and then they do it. I think that also works. But I really worry about folks that go through and they're like, I don't really understand how higher ed works, what professors do, what does it mean to be a researcher and do that? And you mean I have to sit behind my computer and write for 3-4 hours every day? I don't really know what I want to study. And you don't go around then collecting degrees or doctoral degrees in those cases. It just really concerns me because it's a big investment for you, for your family and close ones, as well as the university and the faculty. So in that sense of it, be a little bit careful. But like in your case too, if you're deciding like, hey, like sport, coaching, adaptive, para, these are the areas, maybe let me find out who's doing these sorts of things and maybe what the options are. And then that takes you into doing some research and scouting the field in the area makes a lot of sense. I think that's better than, there are folks that eventually figure out like, okay, well, I can publish this research and do this kind of stuff, but it's really, they're not really maybe passionate about it or interested. It becomes more of a job than it does a craft or a career or passion. It's like, yeah, I'm doing the higher ed thing and I published a little bit here and there and I can do that, kind of stuff. Oh, I'm a faculty. And you're like, yeah, but you're really not embracing, I think, what it means to be a scholar, or, you kind of fell into it, ho hum. And I don't know. I mean, like, okay, but really, like it's like in coaching, like who wants a ho hum kind of coach? Like, yeah, coach is here. Yeah, you're not like collecting tickets or something, and you can just, it's not such a technical procedural sort of thing then. I didn't even talk about having kids too. I had my daughter, by the way, so I went to college straight through. I was undergrad to master's to PhD, 10 years straight. And we have my daughter who's now, she turns 13 here in a couple of days. And I took that kind of year off. My wife had gone back to school and I was working on my dissertation, but I wasn't enrolled in credit hours. And then when she got pregnant again, we had our son 14 months apart. And I was like, man, I gotta graduate because this is getting, brutal right now. And I'm not sleeping and it was rough. And there's an abbreviation. It's called ABD, or all but dissertation. And it's kind of a pejorative term. It's like a negative term to refer to people in doc programs that have done all the coursework, but have not finished the dissertation. I call them ABD, all but dissertation. And it's almost like the scarlet letter. Like, it's like, ooh, you were so close and just couldn't finish, and I don't say that to make fun of. I'm not saying that, but like, it's really a hard hurdle and you've got to focus, right? You've got to have quiet time. You got to go away. You have to tell people bye-bye. I'll see you in 6 months, a year. And it's really hard to explain to people because most people haven't done it. And it's a level of focus and concentration that, right, like, JD's got the kids coming in. It's really hard to finish when you're constantly and trying to juggle a million other things. It's just really challenging. All right, gentlemen, thank you for coming. I think that wraps it up. I'll take any feedback or whatnot later. And we'll see about round 3 and continue this thing. But I appreciate you guys, coming and your questions and engagement, helping not only hopefully yourselves, but our program and other people, because we're going to put it out there, and other people too that are thinking about these things.
Thanks for the help.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for coming on, guys.
appreciate this, right? That's what you need. It's all about the discourse.